Thank you. Good morning. Happy Sabbath. Welcome to Bible study. I want to congratulate you for defeating the rain and for coming out in spite of it. We are in the book of Exodus, continuing our study through the book of Exodus. You probably have already your worksheet. There is a mistake there. It's lesson number 16, not 15. But the content is the correct one. Exodus chapter 22. By way of revision, because we didn't have a class last week, I would like us to remember where we are in the book of Exodus. So this whole section starts in chapter 19 and goes all the way to chapter 24. And in chapter 19, God offers a covenant with Israel. And Israel is at the foot of Mount Sinai. There at Mount Sinai, God gives them first the 10 words, which we know by the name of 10 Commandments or Decalogue, right? Then there is a moment when the people is afraid. They have fear. And this is right after God has been speaking to them verbally. God speaks and they directly hear God speaking. But at one point they say, hey, if this goes on like this, we're in danger. We're going to die. Let's change something. Let God speak to you, Moses, and then you speak to us. So the rest of this section is still God speaking, only that now God speaks to Moses and Moses speaks to the people, as opposed to God speaking directly to the people. And this section in chapter 21, 22, 23 is what is called the judgments of God, or the justices, or in Hebrew is the mishpatim, which means these are the ways the judges have to do justice in the people. So this section here, the 10 Commandments, seem to be the constitution or the fundamental law or the principles of life that Yahweh proposes to the people. And then the book of covenant on the other end here, chapters 21 to 23, is how you apply those 10 principles of life, the 10 commandments, to specific life situations. And most of the things that we find in the book of the covenant are case laws. If this happens, then this is how you are supposed to proceed. What is interesting and I think important to understand here is that in both cases it is God speaking. And this is not any kind of ceremonial law, really, because at this time we still do not have the sanctuary built. The sanctuary will be built later. So we cannot just take these divine judgments or case laws or practical applications of the 10 commandments and say, well, these are not for us, these are part of the ceremonial law, these are not in use anymore. Everything that is in this section can teach us something. Now, obviously, we here, including me, we are not judges in the sense those laws, those specific case laws, were to be applied by the judges of the people. Because remember, in chapter, I think it's 16, there is, or 18, let me check. Exodus chapter 18 it is. Jethro, who is Moses' father-in-law, seeing that Moses is the only judge in the people. What is a judge? The judge is somebody you come to and tell him, hey, this is the injustice I've suffered. And the judge says, okay, based on what it looks like, this is the solution. Okay? And Jethro says to Moses, hey, listen, it's not good that you're the only judge and the people will line up to even get to you. Some of them have to stand in the heat of the day, throughout the day, so that they will finally be able to get and speak to you. That's not good. Do something. Organize the justice process in the people. How? Well, put judges. And in chapter 18, verse 21, it says, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. So there are different degrees of rulers that will do the justice in the people. Over 10 people, over 50 people, over 100 people, over 1,000 people. And only the cases that are too big, too complicated, too intricate to be solved by these smaller judges will hit the Supreme Court, so to speak, and will be handled by Moses directly. So this legislation, starting with chapter 21, in which God says, and God spoke to Moses, all these, verse 21, now these are the judgments, right, or ordinances, which you shall set before them. It is ways of teaching the people how to live together peacefully or justly. And I know when we read these things, sometimes we can be disturbed and ask, okay, but where is grace in this? Please understand that when we read the book of the covenant with these judgments or case laws, we are not speaking here about salvation specifically, whether somebody will be saved or not. That's not the discussion here. Because grace is available for everybody to be saved. But grace will not pay for the damage that somebody suffered because of loss or because of theft. Okay? The mere fact that God is gracious to the one that did the wrong does not mean that if somebody hit your car, just because God is gracious, your car doesn't have to be fixed. Correct? Yes, it's wonderful that God is gracious, and yet somebody has to pay for the car. So you cannot allow yourself, just because God is gracious, so now you can go to the parking lot, and if there's not enough space in the parking lot, then you hit the car to move it a little bit, because, hey, in the end, God is gracious. See, that's the difference here. So in spite of the fact that God is gracious, we have to learn how to live justly together. And if we damage somebody, then we have to correct that specific damage. So after we have the offer, we have the Ten Commandments, we have the book of the covenant, which are applications, those case laws, those specifications, or applications of the 10 principles given by God. That's when the offer of the covenant is accepted in chapter 24. So let's go now through the specific case laws in chapter 22. This is how it goes. If or when a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. Interesting. So let me ask you, if somebody did this, stole an ox and had to give back 5 oxen, will that person steal one once again? See where this is going? So the issue is not who's going to be saved or not. The issue is, how can we stop injustice? And it's interesting that in the case of a sheep, which is a smaller animal than an ox, he has to give back how many times? 4 times. But in the case of an ox, 5 times. So it seems that it gives you a sense of proportionality. The bigger the animal, the bigger the restitution has to be. And now there are some sub-cases to this specific case law. If the thief is found breaking in and he is struck so that he dies, so you see the thief coming and you strike the thief, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. But this only applies if it's during the night. And you probably know that even here in America there are specific laws of trespass. In some states at least, not sure if it's overall, there's a difference between night and day. Because during the night you don't see who's there and the intention of the person. It says, if the sun has risen on him, so this is now daylight, there shall be guilt for his bloodshed. So you cannot just strike somebody with the risk of killing somebody if it's during the day, because you see the person. But this is how it continues. He, the thief, should make full restitution. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So if somebody steals and he's not able to do the full restitution, which in the case of a sheep is 4 times, in the case of an ox 5 times, the person is sold. Why is he sold? Well, obviously to work the value of that damage off. And this is not being sold for good, like for the rest of your life you will be somebody's servant. No. First of all, Israelites could not have slaves in the sense of how the other nations would have slaves. But they could have servants even from among their own people in this specific case. Meaning, if you stole stuff and you cannot do restitution, you are being sold and you have to work that damage off. The maximum, we've seen this in the previous case laws, the maximum time you can serve as a servant to somebody, an Israelite is how many years? 6, because in the 7th you are let free. Okay? So no matter how big the damage is, it cannot be longer. Please notice also that there is no specific case law to say that if the damage was smaller, say somebody did a damage of $100, so, or say $1,000, so we have a bigger margin, that person will have to work for 6 years no matter what, because that would be an abuse. That's overworking. But you would have to work off your damage in the value that the damage had. So if you stole, say, an ox, and according to this, you have to give back 5 oxen, you will have to work until the value of the 5 oxen will be paid off. Now, let me ask you, if this is the rule, again, we are not discussing here if the person is saved or not. Salvation is by grace. That's God's business. These are specific laws of living together. If somebody did that, stole an ox, and had to restitute to pay back 5 times, would that person steal again? I have very strong doubts with regard to that. Because then you know how severe the law is. It goes on, if the thief is certainly found alive if the theft is certainly found alive in his hands, that is, in the hands of the thief, whether it is an ox or donkey or sheep, he shall restore double. So here is the thing. If somebody steals, but they didn't have the time to kill or to sell off that animal, you found the animal in his hands, he only has to pay back double. But if that person killed the animal or sold the animal, that's when the 4-time or 5-time restitution applies. If, verse 5, or when a man causes a field of vineyard to be grazed and lets loose his animal, and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. Is that off? No. I grew up out in the country. And I'm telling you, cows would not love to eat the corn of your own field the way they love to eat the corn of your neighbor. It's just very funny. It's like it's sweeter over there. I mean, you wanna keep your animals on your own property, and it's like somebody is stirring them in the wrong direction, and they will go, and even in passing, they will and then move back. That's what happens. And I've seen this in practice. You don't have to call the police. You don't have to wait until law enforcement or the court pronounces a judgment. If you know your cow damaged the crops of your neighbor, well, go and count how many corn plants were destroyed, because there's a damage there, because you have cornfield of your own, and it wouldn't have been a problem for your cow to eat your own corn. But your cow went to eat the corn of your neighbor. Not a big deal, you would say. Well, it is for him. Because corn is food, not only for cows, but also for the family. So I've seen this happen in practice, where the neighbor took the basket, filled it up with the best corn he had, went to the neighbor and said, "Hey, here's your corn. My cow ate your corn." Nothing off. Of course, there's forgiveness, but somebody has to fix the damage as well. Now, if I am a rich person and your cow ate my corn, I can tell you, because maybe you're poor, say in a scenario, I can tell you, okay, I really appreciate this big basket of corn you want to give me as a restitution for the damage made. Okay, give me only half of it, okay? Because I know it wasn't your intention. It was not that you intentionally took your cow to my field so it will make damage. No. So give me only the half of it. And that's a beautiful act of mercy, I would say, right? But still, responsibility exists. 6, if or when fire breaks out and catches in thorns, so that standing grain, or the field is consumed, he who kindled the fire shall surely make restitution. And you know what fire means in California. Now, right here, we are not in an agricultural area, right here. But you go a little north, vast fields of all kinds of things. You don't want to mess with fire. Somebody has to carry responsibility. And thank God, I would say, there is something called insurance these days, which can help alleviate the burden. But responsibility still exists. If, verse 7, when a man delivers to his neighbor money or articles to keep, and it is stolen, so you gave your things to your neighbor to be kept because you went on a trip, and it is stolen out of the man's house, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. So the thief was found, the thief has to pay double for the object that he stole from the house of your neighbor, object that you gave to your neighbor to keep. If, subcase, the thief is not found, then the master of the house shall be brought to the judges. Again, this is not a church procedure per se. This is, the man has to be brought to the judges to see whether he has put his hand into his neighbor's goods. This is based on common psychology. If I give you something to keep, because I will go on a trip, and when I come back, you will tell me, listen, somebody stole this object that you gave me to keep. Who stole it? And you will say, I have no idea. What will be my suspicion? That you hid it. If you don't know who stole it, how do you know it was stolen, right? So I can suspect you. So then you will go to the judges with me, explain to the judges, and it's the judge's responsibility to see, to establish whether it is indeed your responsibility or not. Because it can be that you indeed have no guilt. So why would I charge you for something that you are not guilty for? And then we have some case laws that apply in the case of death, injury, loss relating to animals. For any kind of trespass, whether it concerns an ox, a donkey, a sheep, or clothing, or for any kind of lost thing which another claimed to be his, the cause of both parties shall come before the judges, and whomever the judges condemn shall pay double to his neighbor. Let me make it simple. We are going on the street, and something is on the street, and I reach down and say, oh, wow, this is mine. But the other guy says, oh, no, this is mine. Whose is it? Well, we have to take it to the judges, and the judges will establish whose it is. Point being, when you find something lost and found, we all have that concept in the American system. If you find something that's not necessarily yours, now in 21st century, if you find a big wallet with money, you may be very happy and say, hey, God gave it to me. So good, thank God. But somebody lost that wallet. And if it's a big amount of money, and I know stories where almost the whole gain of a lifetime was in a wallet, and they lost it. And then somebody found it and brought it back, or brought it to the police station, and the police station figured out whom that thing belonged, to whom it belonged. And just imagine the joy of somebody that lost something, and now it was given back to them. It would be very easy to say, hey, listen, whatever is found is yours. No. Somebody has that thing. Is it fair or not? I guess it is, since it's not yours. Now, if you've done your diligence to restitute, to give it back to the person, and there's no person that claims it, I don't know for how many years. But what if after 10 years somebody will come and claims that object? I have a very interesting story. Somebody that, in Loma Linda, there's a guy that fixes watches. I don't know, how do you call that? Watch what? Watch repair, yeah, something like that. And he said there was a guy that brought him a clock 21 years ago. 21 years ago. And he said, I often stumbled on that clock because it's a big wall clock. And sometimes you feel like, okay, let me just throw it out or sell it. Because now you don't even know where that person lives. After 21 years, the person came and he said, hey, I'm here for my watch, for my clock. And you will say, well, that's crazy. Well, it is, but you have crazy things happen in life. This guy was honest and said, yeah, I do have your clock. Went, brought it, gave it back to the owner. Private property, please understand this. The fact that in America there's a big emphasis on private property is the result of biblical precepts. Not in every culture is the same. There are cultures in which private property can be very relative. You see something, you like it, you grab it. Is that correct? Of course not. All right? Let's move on. If or when a man delivers to his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep, and it dies, is hurt, or driven away, no one seeing it, then an oath of the Lord shall be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's good. And the owner of it shall accept that he shall not make it good. And he shall not make it good. For instance, I gave my cow to be kept by somebody. And you can replace cow with your car, because you don't have cows here, but you have cars. I gave my car to somebody to be kept. Somebody parked their car on my property, my parking lot. And next morning when I wake up, the car is gone. When the owner comes back to claim the car, what am I going to say? How does the owner know it wasn't me? Well, I have to go to the judges, and an oath of the Lord shall be between them both. This is very interesting, especially for some people that somehow got to the conclusion that we are not supposed to make oaths. Look, it is very specific. An oath establishes the issue. Subcase to this case. But if, in fact, it is stolen from him, which means there's some negligence probably involved here, he shall make restitution to the owner of it. So if it's stolen from me, then I have to do restitution. If it is torn to pieces by a beast, that's another subcase, then he shall bring it as evidence. So bring the torn animal as evidence and shall not make good what was torn. In other words, if my animal is with my neighbor to keep and some savage animals attack my cow and devour my cow, I have to bring some proof to the judges because I am not supposed to risk my life to save your cow. Okay? Makes sense? And if a man borrows, so this is different from somebody giving an animal to somebody to keep. This is a man borrowing that animal, most probably for work, like a horse. You borrow a horse in the Amish community, because we don't have horses here. But there are many places in the world where this still has an input, right? If somebody borrows that animal from his neighbor and it becomes injured or dies, the owner of it, not being with it, so this happens when I'm not there, he shall surely make it good. That is restitution. If its owner was with it, he shall not make it good. If it was hired, it came for its hire. In other words, if I am there working on your field with my own animal, but you hired me, and the animal is damaged while I'm working with it on your field, while I'm there as a hired worker together with my animal, then the damage of my animal is not the responsibility of the owner of the field. It is my responsibility. I was hired together with my animal, so if the damage happens, it's on me. Let me give you an example. It happened to me a few months ago. I borrowed a tool, a certain kind of saw. I borrowed it from a good friend. It wasn't a big deal. It was a pretty small tool, and it turned out it wasn't even expensive. But as I was working with it, doing a little remodeling project in my own home, I plugged it in, and when I pulled the cord, one of the metal pieces that go into those things, remained in the socket. Now what? I took something, carefully because there's electricity there, okay? Pulled that piece out, and now I was contemplating whether I can fix it or not. And I got to the conclusion there's no way to fix it because it's right there in that, a critical end of the cord. So I did a search, see how much it costs. Because what was my responsibility now? Responsibility. Give it back the way I got it. Okay? So I did a research, it was $25. Oh, I said, okay, I'm going to buy two to give it back to him and to have one myself. Correct? What would have happened if he was there with me and he had been working with the tool while working for me, but he was working with the tool? Would I have had the same responsibility? No, because he broke his tool. Right? Non-capital offenses. If or when, watch this one, this is very interesting. When a man entices a virgin who is not engaged or betrothed and lies with her, he shall surely pay the bride price for her to be his wife. Now, watch. In many cultures, people stopped reading up to this point only, and took it as a very, very abusive kind of case law, because somebody put your daughter, say, to shame, okay, to use a very elegant, or as elegant as it can be, formula, and then he has to take her into marriage. But he has to pay the dowry, so to speak, because that's the culture. And you will say, okay, so isn't that abusive? I mean, maybe this girl was enticed, she was fooled to have that relationship, one stand night. She's used. Okay, so now should we punish her even more and give her into marriage to that guy? The legislation goes on, and it has a subcase. It says, if her father utterly refuses to give her to him, meaning he has a reason to say, no, my daughter cannot be your wife. And there might be some reason there. This guy may be an abuser, like even a criminal of some kind. He shall pay money according to the bride price of virgins. So the guy still has to pay the money, but the girl will not be his wife. So it's the responsibility of the father to step in if indeed is a case of abuse. But it can be that the two really like one another. It happens so many times. I mean, I could say, no, this didn't happen to anybody within Seventh-day Adventism. No, I know stories. They did it, and they got married, and they have been living happily ever since. But there are cases and cases, okay? Point is, mere sexual relationship with somebody is not a must for somebody to get into a marriage. It's not something that pushes forcefully somebody into marriage. Capital offenses. You, that is the community, shall not permit a sorceress, which is a witch, to live. Whoever lies with an animal, so this is a zoophile, this is bestiality, shall surely put to death. I know this sounds very weird. He who sacrifices to any god, except to the Lord Yahweh only, he shall be utterly destroyed. The Hebrew says, devoted to destruction. Now you may think, why this? I mean, why is Yahweh so exclusive? The explanation is this. In those days, to bring sacrifices to the gods quite often entailed human sacrifice or child sacrifice. You can read in the Old Testament about people sacrificing their child to Molech. You've heard about that, right? So there is a reason why God is so categorical here. Relationships relating to strangers, widows, orphans, poor people. You shall neither mistreat a stranger or a sojourner, a resident alien, if you want, in a very specific American language. You shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Very interesting. God says, no, just because somebody is a stranger. I don't know in your culture, but I know cultures in which if you are a stranger, like you moved to that specific village or town at a certain age of your life, until you die, they will let you know systematically you're a stranger. You will never outgrow your status as a stranger. Culture. So God says, hey, you've been abused, being strangers. You are not allowed to mistreat a stranger or oppress a stranger. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. And watch to see the argument God uses. If there are some sub-cases, some case laws here. If you afflict them in any way, the widow or the fatherless child, and they cry at all to me, I will surely hear their cry. And they cry because you abuse them, and I hear them. And my wrath will become hot, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives shall be widows, and your children fatherless. Wow. Is this how God feels about oppressing the widow and the fatherless? Yes. Takes it very seriously. If you lend money to any of my people who are poor among you, please underscore poor. You lend money to a poor, somebody that cannot make ends meet and asks for money. You shall not be like a money lender to him. You shall not charge him interest. This doesn't apply for those rich people that always want to make business with somebody else's money and would take your money away and act as if you have to give them money and ask for no interest because your friends, your brothers. No. This is about the poor. Okay? If you ever take your neighbor's garment as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. Why? He's going to need it, for that is his only covering. It is his garment for his skin. God knows that if somebody has to go as far as to give his clothes as a pledge, that person must be what kind of person? A poor person. So that person will need that garment. What will he sleep in? Yeah, I know this. We have pajamas, all kind of pajamas with giraffes and crocodiles and beautiful stars and flowers. They didn't have that in those days. Most often, the clothes that would protect you from the sun would also protect you from the cold in the night. If that is his only covering, it is his garment for his skin. What will he sleep in? And it will be that when he cries to me, I will hear, and then there's something I love. For I am, what? Am I? For I am gracious. That's why God is gracious toward the poor, toward the widow, the fatherless, the one that is on the periphery of society. And interestingly, you will be able to check it out in Deuteronomy chapter 24. You can never take the garment of a widow as a pledge. There's a specific law in Deuteronomy that if it's a widow, you cannot take her clothes away. And I think there might be some implications there, because there's a risk that somebody, if you take their clothes, they will walk around half naked. And there's a shame situation involved there as well. And we finish this chapter with some consecration laws. You shall not revile God or insult or curse God, nor curse a ruler of your people. Don't curse the ruler of your people. Don't curse the president. Don't curse the governor. Don't curse the mayor. Okay? Those are rulers of your people. You shall not delay to offer the first of your ripe produce and your juices to the Lord. The firstborn of your son you shall give to him. Likewise you shall do with your oxen, your sheep. It shall be with its mother 7 days. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. And you shall be holy men to me. You shall not eat meat torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. But interestingly, there's another case law in Deuteronomy 14 where the dead animal, not the one torn by beasts, the dead animal, you can give it to the foreigner. The one torn by beasts, you cannot even give to the foreigner. And I tried to do a little research to see why that. And I'm hearing that when an animal is killed by being torn apart by other animals, there are some toxins that are created in that body, and the meat can be problematic to eat. But again, I'm not sure that's why. But God decided to put that in here somehow. I will retake probably next week these last 3 consecration kind of laws. But I want us now to have a little chat, see what seems odd, what seems reasonable here, how we can relate to these kind of things. Again, the conversation is not here whether the person is saved or lost. That's not the conversation. That's God's business. God does the salvation work. Here, we are dealing with some civil laws where the question is, okay, how can we live together in a just way, in a way that can be peaceful, that can have shalom within us or among us? Question? Please raise your hand. If you have a question, if you want to ask a question based on what we have been presenting. No question? Yes, there is a question here.
I was just wondering this thing about charging interest in the Muslim faith. They don't buy a house if they cannot afford it in cash, or a car unless they can pay in cash. So they're always leasing because they believe that the scriptures, which is the Old Testament, prohibits them from paying interest. Where did they get that from?
Who are these?
Muslims.
The Muslims. Okay. I do not have specific information on that. There might be something in the Quran that goes in that direction. What I think is important with regard to these kind of case laws is not to read into it things that are normal or common in society today. So this case law here with regard to giving money with no interest refers specifically to the poor. Okay? There's a poor person that asks for money, and you may say, hey, this is a good opportunity for me to make money now. Mm-hmm. And God says, no. That's a poor person. You give him money, and you will not charge an interest. Yes?
This, on the same thought is, in today's society, we need to also protect our own elderly in our church because there's a lot of abuse on elderly people because they know they have some money saved, and they're taking advantage of this, so we need to also protect the people in our church.
Correct. I think you have a wonderful point here. Sometimes people that have a pretense of spirituality are crooks, charlatans. Yeah. And they would treat somebody nicely until they get some goods, some benefits. They can exploit, even rob somebody. So I believe that's a good point. Younger generation, children, grandchildren, keep an eye on the assets, on the values of your parents, of your grandparents. Make sure they are safe. Make sure nobody will be able to exploit them. Because Yes, there is exploitation, there is abuse of all kind happening there. Yeah. Thank you. Any other question? No question? There's a question there.
Well, I guess it's more of, I don't know, more of a comment, but I just was looking. I like to read the Hebrew on the blue letter Bible or whatever, or one of the Bible apps, and the restitution is the word salam, similar to Jerusalem or Jerusalem.
Yeah. The concept of peace,
restitution of peace, of wholeness, of restoration, and I just got thought about the new Jerusalem, the new
excellent
Jerusalem
observation
coming to earth,
yep.
This feeling of restitution that happens. I mean, I think these things that we're reading are us trying to live as justly and as much in shalom as possible, and we have these promises of, I think these things are types, and these types can sometimes break down and not be God's fullness of his restoration, but we have this hope. And
I like the word you're using. I like the word you're using because the word restitution in English can carry some negative aspects to it, like punishment or even sort of a revenge kind of thing, restitution. But a restoration is a word that completely fits the concept of shalom, salam, which has to do with peace. So I think it would be correct to translate it into English as a way of restoration. Yeah? So you've done the damage, now you're doing the restoration of the one you've damaged. You're bringing that person back to the state of shalom, well-being or restored life. Excellent.
I heard some messages about that where, God can take our mistakes and God can turn these things into this restorative process we can never imagine, but God can create wonderful things out of, God makes all things well. And this idea of this new Jerusalem, this new time of tears being wiped away and all things being made well, even with the mistakes we've made. I don't know, it's just kind of a beautiful concept.
Absolutely. And when God restores, He is abundant in His restoration. And somebody that suffered damage may get even more back than what we had, what he or she had before. Speaking about this concept of restoration and well-being and shalom, I've been thinking ever since we had the last Bible study 2 weeks ago about the fifth commandment, because the fifth commandment, that is Exodus 20, verse 12, says this: honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. And it never dawned on me until after the study last time that this, your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you, is connected to those two case laws when somebody strikes his parents or somebody curses his parents, where the case law is very drastic. You do that, you're taken out. So this long living, the concept of long living, I think is connected to that. So you want to honor your parents, otherwise you may be taken out ahead of time. You will leave the realm of the living before you reach an old age. But here's what I want us to understand. These are justice laws executed by the justice system of the time. Don't think that every day or every other day parents would drag their children in front of the judges so they will sentence them to death and they will execute them. keep in mind the fact that the parent has a loving heart as well. Most cases of those kind of abuse would never reach the judges because the parents would forgive their children. But there would be cases that happen in public, and somebody hits their parents in public, and somebody curses their parents in public. Those cases could have a likelihood to reach the judges. Right? So always keep in perspective that there is no certainty that every case law will be applied at the severeness level that you have in the writing. Because grace is always involved. But what the case laws teach us is that God takes those things very, very seriously. Any other question or observation? Please, yeah, here.
Can you explain a couple of things to me? When they say cursing your parents, does that mean cussing them out, or what does it mean?
Yeah, see, I did a research on that, and I don't think it includes casual cussing. Not that that is good, okay? But I think the word cursing here is something very strong, something that involves some sort of almost ritualistic and a God being involved kind of procedure, like invoking the name of God to destroy your parents or something like that. I don't know. I don't want to be specific like that, but I think there is potent evidence in the text, and comparing the word curse there with other texts, that this is something very major. It's not like you had a fight, you had a quarrel with your parents, and you dropped some not so pleasant words. I don't think that's the meaning of the word. Although the honor your parents concept includes probably that kind of things too. Yes. Sorry? Yeah, the battery died there. How do you honor your parents? You honor them. I don't find a very specific definition of how to honor your parents. There is an application of honoring your parents in Ephesians chapter 6, where the application is obey your parents in Lord. So when it comes to your parents that are in the Lord, they have the Lord as their master, then you obey them. But I believe that only applies to parents. You can check it out at the beginning of chapter 6 in Ephesians. You can imply from there that you are not necessarily supposed to obey your parents in everything if they are wrong. But when they are right, when they are God-led, Spirit-led, then you are supposed to obey. And then there's language, there's gestures, there's taking care of them, there is cherishing them, depending on some cultural aspects as well, because sometimes culture demands a certain thing. And even if it's not a big deal in your mind, if in that culture it is a big deal, it may be that you should take that into consideration. One more question here, and Alan. Alan had his hand up, and I think we are good to conclude. Up. It's up. Okay, try it. Okay, any other mic, because this is.
No, it's on.
It's on. Okay. Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I'd kind of like to bring this back to the surface a little bit. All of these look like they're studies in character development.
It's dying. The microphone is dying.
No, just, okay, keep going.
Okay.
You're not going to be extorting the poor or mistreating the widow, because you will be led, and your relationship will lead your behavior. So we can get caught in the weeds with all these do's and don'ts and all of this, and yeah, they're good for reprimand or whatever, but the fact of the matter is we need to have a standing relationship with our Creator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why later on in Jeremiah, and then it's repeated in Hebrews, God says, I'm going to write my laws in their hearts and in their minds, which means the law will not be an exterior code that you always have to read to see what you can do and what you cannot do, because you have it within you. Jesus is living within you, and you will treat people the way Jesus would treat them. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You have a question? Please give a mic to Danielle.
Thanks. Had decided to speak to Moses directly, and he met with him, and he came down from the mountain, and he had the veil upon him because the Shekinah glory was on him, but then the glory started to fade. What was that for? Why did the brightness fade from him, from Moses?
Well, the answer that I would try right now, although I think it would deserve a closer look, and we will go there because it's still upcoming in the book of Exodus. God's presence does a sort of transfiguration, and we can see that in the case of Moses here in Exodus, and then we can see it in the case of Jesus with Elijah and Moses on the Mount of Transfiguration. God's presence brings a kind of shining, a kind of glory, and it seems that presence, that manifestation of the presence slowly does fade away. You would have to go back into his presence to get it back. And I would risk say that it has to do with the book of Genesis, first 3 chapters. I would risk saying that if chapter 3 in the book of Genesis had not existed, then the presence of God would shine on our face continually. But in a sinful stage, that is something that is placed upon you, and then it fades away, and you need to go back into his presence. Yeah. Thank you. Let's pray and call it a study. And we are going to continue next week, chapter 23, and we are finally done. I know this is heavy stuff. I can't wait to pass it. But we don't want to act as if it's not in the Bible, okay? We want to learn from it. Lord, we pray that your Spirit will continue to guide us and give us more insights and depth of how you see reality and how you want to create a more and more peaceful shalom relationship among us and in our hearts. We thank you in Jesus' name through the Holy Spirit. Amen.